Ados, Matthew Hayden here with us. We'll take questions as you raise your hands. We have 15 minutes. Let's keep it short.
Matthew, India is going to tour to Australia this winter. What's your take on it? And
Yeah, it's going to be an unbelievable series, isn't it? Historic series, and actually not without, great minds coming together to make what is a premier tournament even more special by extending it to 5 test matches. I always feel like 3 test matches, well, 2 test matches is just a horrible series. 3 test matches is, you always feel half pregnant. 4 test matches, you have a bit of cricket, but there's always that swinging vote. Whereas 5 test matches, you got a chance to win, you also get a chance to lose, and then you got a chance to come back and win. So it gives the whole concept of a drawn test match series not so much of a chance to breathe. So I love it. It's going to be a great series.
Matt here, how much of the defeats that India gave Australia in the previous visits will charge the Aussies up, or how much will Indians get the confidence of winning back-to-back in Australia in the coming series?
I was seeing a reel from Ravi Shastri today on Instagram, and he was saying the Aussies hadn't had the Border Gavaskar Trophy in their hands for almost a decade. Well, them's the fighting words straight away. We haven't had it in our hands for 2 series in Australia, which is kind of the coveted grounds, not dissimilar to, the Steve Waugh era here in 2001, where this was the hallowed turf, this was the place where Australia really wanted to come and win, and his great era didn't do it. So there's always, this is why I think it's such a special series, there's always this fantastic opportunity for the number 1 and number 2 side of the Test World Championship to go head to head, especially abroad, in each other's camps, and see who really has those kind of final rights to claim not only the possibility of playing the Test Championship, but also who's the very best of the best, which you judge on how you tour, not so much how you play at home.
Without Warner, do you think opening is a little bit of concern?
Yes, it is. It is. For the first time, it doesn't feel as secure. David Warner gave, a great service to Australian cricket. He gave a service that was extremely competitive, wonderfully dynamic. He really took that legacy that I'd created, through the 2000s to a new level. Strike rates in excess of 80, and gave great momentum to the top order, which otherwise is quite a conservative, very good but very conservative batting lineup. So I think he's a enormous loss in terms of how do you replace them. Clearly they've gone in the direction of Steve Smith thus far. Whether they continue with that strategy, time will tell. And we have guys like Bancroft, that are always in the pipeline. Matt Renshaw's in the pipeline. Bancroft, when you look at his form in England, has been, excellent. But that's domestic cricket. It's not Border Gavaskar type cricket. So, a few things to really prove from that engine room of Australian cricket, which is being challenged right now with Davies' absence.
just to add to that. Thing, Steve Smith, do you think is the ideal choice to replace him as an opener, as Australia will trying? But
look, the rationale that George Bailey gave was correct insofar as that he thought it was he just was choosing his best top 6 players, batsmen. Now you can't argue with Steve Smith, who's averaging 65 in Test match cricket, 32 Test match hundreds, and just all over, play. But the role of an opening batsman compared to a middle order batsman is very different. And it didn't take long to discover that when you get into challenging conditions like they faced in the first series outside of Australia, which was in New Zealand, that opening the batting is very difficult. And so, look, I personally, as I said at the time, was on record saying that I didn't like changing. I think it's crazy to think that you have the world's best in class batter in a certain position, and then you change to a completely different position. For a few reasons, I think that's crazy. Firstly, why? Such a gun in that position, such a coveted player. And then it also is not a great nod to the first class setup, which is very much in Australian cricket culture being driving great results towards key roles, be that any one of the roles, wicket-keeping, batting, spinners, fast bowlers, opening batters. So, the 1, 2 and 3 is a category which needs to be protected in my opinion. It sets up play.
How do you see Yashasvi Jaiswal shaping up in the 5-test series? If he gets all 5 test matches to go, someone like Nathan Lane has already said he's going to target singles. We already had a word with Tom Hartley, the spinner.
Isn't it great that this series is shaping up to be a heavyweight bout? Someone like the GOAT going after, what is, in my opinion, one of the key assets for Indian cricket. And Yazzy's certainly proving to be that. And one of the things that I'm really curious to understand, even on a night like tonight, the night of nights of celebrating, cricket across the world, is how do young players actually perceive Test cricket, and is this current group of Test cricketers driven to excellence by the competitive lineup and nature of Indian cricket right now? It doesn't matter which format of the game you look at. You go, gosh, there could be a second or even a third side here that could do, this country very proud. That's a phenomenal, access to talent, but also phenomenal pathways because it's driven by competition. Very similar to the era that I felt really privileged to be playing in. It was 4 or 5 guys that could have been opening the batting, with me, or I'm sitting there in the wings as I was for 7 years waiting for my opportunity. So that's the strength currently of Indian cricket, in my opinion, is certainly around how much competition there is. With young Jaswal, it's an exciting prospect to see how he'll play.
Just to follow up, what do you like about the most? His fearlessness, stroke play, or just the temper, all put together? Is he a package?
I think he's a package. Yes, his stroke play is superb. His ability in particular to hit on the up through the covers is phenomenal. That'll also have its vulnerabilities. I'm looking forward to seeing how he adjusts, on bouncy tracks. We did notice a few times in the IPL that there was some. He's a very hard hitter of the ball, pull shots in particular. But that'll be challenged by 3 world-class speedsters, assuming they're all fit, and on much bigger grounds as well. Grounds that it has to almost be the perfect contact for that ball to sail over 6. You can get caught easily 3/4 of the way in the fence. So they're little adjustments that world-class players like Josie will make, for sure.
How do you expect the pitches to be, Matthew? There's one of the Bengal test as well.
Yeah, look, it's a pretty well-worn path, our drop-in wickets, meaning that the groundsmen tend to start them with quite a lot of grass cover, between 11 and 13 mil usually on day one, which means that they can be quite spicy with the new ball. They leave them that way because what happens inevitably is they get flatter and flatter and flatter, and they don't break up, crack, and turn. There's not a lot in it for the bowlers post the first few days. So we're talking now, when you look at the string of the venues, you've got Perth, you've then got Adelaide, then you've got Brisbane, then you've got the traditions of Sydney and Melbourne Test match. 3 out of 5 are drop-in wickets. 1 is a day-night Test match, which the second Test match, again, once you get those overhead conditions under that twilight zone, they can be really difficult. I would go as far as to say that the home advantage in Australia has been taken away quite a lot, simply on the basis that if you get the wrong side of a certain session, be that 4 for 130, you know, at twilight. You can be 8 for 150. You know, so there's no chance to actually really naturally dominate a game. It's quite even the whole time. So it's a very different type of cricket, certainly to our area of cricket, because you don't have those traditional surfaces.
Matthew, we spoke about Australia not getting their hands on the Border Gavaskar Trophy for the last 10 years. In the same perspective, if you think about two main characters of the two teams, one there is Virat Kohli, one there is Steve Smith. Both of them have literally blundered runs against each other. How do you see them having an imprint on the series? The kind of build-up that they've had, given there has been a significant break in Test cricket. There hasn't been much of a practice. Obviously, India will be playing some amount of Test cricket.
But not much, and Australia definitely none. You know, it'll play a couple of first-class games. Luckily, our first-class cricket, Sheffield Shield cricket's very competitive, and I'm sure that our guys will have looked forward to two things: had a pre-season and a bit of a break, because mentally, Test match cricket is a whole lot more demanding, and sometimes the fresher the athlete, the better. A good example of that is someone like Travis Head, who hadn't hit a ball ahead of that Test championship post the IPL, and yet came out and did what he did, that day at the Oval. So mental fatigue can play a big role in the modern player, and freshness can sometimes be bestest. But having said that, cricket is also a game of momentum, and I'm sure those two players that you mentioned, coming now to the latter pages of their cricketing career, will be very keen to dominate the landscape through the summer. That's their nature. They do it in very different ways, very different styles, but certainly, they really are the keys to the Australian summer.
We'll take the last few questions.
Apart from batting comparisons, how do you see India and Australian teams, bowling teams comparison, especially India's fast bowling, which has been improving in past 5-7 years?
It has. And if you do look at the possibility of Shami, who's fit, Siraj, who's back, and of course Jasprit Bummi, you've got three world-class speedsters. When you look at Cummins, Hazelwood, and Stark, you've got phenomenal options, and you've also got a few other options as well that can potentially chime in from a fast bowling point of view. The spin bowling departments, in Australia will always play a spinner in line to back up its three quicks. Its all-rounding department is pretty solid as well. Cameron Green, I think, will find his feet in Test match cricket. He's like a baby giraffe at the moment. He's kind of flops all around the place and has got all the potential, got all the stripes and patterns, and looks great, but hasn't quite worked it out. And then you've got the destruction of someone like Mitch Marsh, who potentially is more of a batting all-rounder than a bowling all-rounder. But you look at the lineups and it's hard to really tell, isn't it, like who's got the edge. I sense that it's going to be runs that are going to be the point of difference, and guys whom are sure bets have retired. Like Pujaba was a sure bet in Australian conditions. Was he exciting? No. Was he effective? Heck yes. So when you look back over the years, guys like Rahul Dravid, VF Slaxman, they were really sure bets in our market. I mean, I remember seeing Rahul Dravid play one of the great innings of all time at Adelaide Oval. His 180 odd there was phenomenal. Waxman's innings, doesn't matter where in Australia or over here, was a great player against Australia. So the best need to stand up in the series. Runs are going to be at a premium, and I also feel like the structure of the tournament being from the west to the east is a bit of a unique way that the Australian landscape of cricket's going to be played out. It's usually the other way around. Yeah, it's going to be a great summer. Can't wait.
Last summer we saw Australia play 7 Test matches against different teams, and they could afford to play their 3 frontline quicks and Nathan Lyon, all of them. I guess one of the reasons was not a single one of those matches went into the 5th day. They hardly had to bowl more than 80-90 overs in a single innings. But this time, 5 test matches against India and haven't won against India in the last 10 years in Australia. What is the best way to keep their bowlers fresh throughout the 5 tests, or should they adopt to the rotational policy?
Yeah, it's a great question in the modern era. You know, when you've got players that are playing across formats, and India's got plenty of those as well. And I'm sure the same question will come up for a Jasprit Bumrah as what it will a Pat Cummins. Look, it's a battle of attrition, but I can't think of too many games of Test match cricket that go 5 days. And so what's typically now happening is that the pattern is being set amongst batting units that they're scoring at faster rates, not T20 rates, but certainly faster rates. But of course, what we all take for granted as cricket followers is just the risk that goes into that. So, you know, batting long periods of time has been kind of the strategy of Australian cricket, hasn't it? It's tried to do that. Usman Khawaja has tried to sort of, Marnus Labuschagne has tried to play that pattern of cricket. And then you get Travis Head who goes, I'm going to rip up the roadmap on that one and try and smash every ball for 6. And Mitchell Marsh is following suit. But generally speaking, there is going to be a wear and tear, and that's the luck of the tournament. I mean, when you look at the Ashes, for example, you know, if Nathan Lyon doesn't step on it, if Nathan Lyon doesn't do his calf, as Glenn McGrath didn't do his, you know, foot, that series can be really different. That's the luck of the draw. The great thing from an Indian perspective, I would sense, is that when you look at the last victory, there was no Virat Kohli. There was what you would have to say is a very much a second team bowling lineup that won at the Gabba. And I think that's the kind of confidence that you can expect this Indian unit to go to our shores and go, guys, we've done this before, and we've done it in a way that's second to none, even without our key players. So, you know, guys like Rishabh Pant have got a muscle memory and a thirst for victory, and he was such a key player last time that he played there. And the Australian public loved him as well because of the nature of the way he played his game. It was exciting, it was innovative, it was just fresh and good. And then you've got your old stewards like Virat Kohli that, you know, that I'm sure will want to make an impression, you know, again. Mixed up with a, you know, bunch of youngsters and it's, yeah, from a batting point of view, I'm really excited to see how India have that strategy to take on the Australian conditions.
And then
Matt, I wanted to ask you about Pat Cummins. His results are there, World Cup or World Test Championship.
Yeah.
But is he into the pantheons of great Australian captains,
Yeah.
or is it just stats, not quality in the leadership?
Yeah, I think he's a great of our game, Pat. I mean, I think he has a very special leadership style and ability. It's a very different style to the former kind of captains of the Australian cricket team that were very much a carrot and stick type approach. He's working.
What is the difference?
Well, he's operating, I think, on a model that's bringing out the individuals and individual preparation in particular. Something which I think our game struggles with, being a team sport. But ultimately, how do you then, you know, get the best out of an individual that has a slightly off-centre approach, like a Zampa, for example. Slightly different approach to leg spin bowling, bowls a lot and often, and you know that's the way he likes to go about it. I mean, it's very hard, even in our generation. How do you tell Shane Warne, as a coach or a captain, how to bowl? I mean, he's beyond any one of us, any mere mortal. You know, so Pat's embraced that, and I think it's taken a great courage, you know, to do that, to build a team around him. And he's got I've followed this team now very closely over the last 2 years, and they're an extremely close team. Like even the former players, when we were upset with the removal of Justin Langer, they closed ranks and doubled down on how it is that they wanted to go about their work, and you know, as a former player, I really respect that. And now having seen it a lot more from that inside out, trailing them right across the world, I think that's very similar, even though it's a different approach to getting a job done. Close cricket teams on and off the pitch, especially in the longer versions of the game, tend to be way more effective. You don't want little fragments and, you know, bombs going off when not necessary. Pat is a great leader, and yeah, I think he will go down as one of our greats. Certainly, you know, the way that he's driving this particular era.
Last question.
Just a generic question on Test cricket. Given the amount of T20 cricket has expanded, the formats as well, and players wanting to play and feature in every single of them, do you think scaling the 10,000 run mark has become even more difficult given the current present circumstances? Because Joe Root has gone past it.
Yeah.
How difficult will it be for the likes of Steve Smith, Virat Kohli, Kane Williamson?
Yeah, it is a really. I mean, we are, you know, as a game responsible for now 3 very established formats of the game. The purists are passionate about Test cricket, in particular, you know, about the marquee Test match series, of which we're about to see in the summer of cricket ahead now. Otherwise, what's the relevance of, you know, your 8 membership nations and your Test championship, which is being dominated again by India and Australia? I mean, you look at a side like England and they're almost at the bottom as that current position. I think they've played 12 or 13 Test matches and they've had as many wins as they've had losses. But they're but we're all kind of looking at them because we go, well, we've got this great new concept called Bazball that's not new, but it's like bringing life into Test match cricket and therefore relevance. T20 cricket, I've just come back from the MLC. There's major investment from, you know, most of the franchises here in India into that competition with the view that they want to participate in, you know, one of the great and largest sporting markets on the planet in America. It certainly was an exciting thing to be a part of. A lot of really key players, you know, were a part of that particular franchise. And you can see the possibility of how that can be a premium event in T20 cricket for years to come. Same as now the CPL, the EPL, the BBL. You're running out of, you know, basically the alphabet in describing the different franchise setups. And so what does that mean for a young Shazbi Jaswal? You know, what's his mind at? Or a Shreyas Iyer, you know, who's played 14 Test matches, who's really as good as God is and in all formats of the game, but what is his heart saying? At 29, I mean, I'd played, you know, 21 Test matches, 7 Test matches and averaged 21. You know, so I hope that he's also thinking, because it's not really a question for us, the pundits, it's for those current players that can't be in 3 different places at once. And also, you know, you can never blame, you know, athletes for wanting to commercialise and have a stake in their own lives and families in games that they enjoy. So it's a really tricky balance, and the game that I really see that is most challenged is probably the 50 over game. But then you tell me, fellas, like what we saw, you know, just last year here in this country, and the euphoria and the level of awareness and the sponsorship and the media rights and the audience on television and the fans around the ground, like I'll never forget, ever. You know, when we lined up for those, and I was on the outer, we lined up for those anthems of 2 countries of Australia and India at the World Cup final in front of 105,000 people or more in Ahmedabad, and those anthems roared. It was phenomenal. So what's going to give is a really hard conversation that the game needs to have. And maybe the only way to look at it is to have the theory of less is more, and carving out certain windows. Because there's my fear, or not fear, but my gratitude towards the shorter versions, especially when you think of the Olympics as a viable option, is that fans and new fans, and I've supported T20 cricket before it was even a concept, and loved playing it before anything. And I just see it on the up, growing on the up, and the game seems to find new ways to still make it exciting. Like, was the IPL any less exciting than the previous 15? I don't think so. I think there were some challenges in and around impact subs, changing totals from 180 to 200 plus, but I didn't see any less fans. I didn't see any less TV audiences. The final, I believe, had 550 million people watching it. And that's a crazy number, right? So to me, if you're sitting in a supermarket, it's a bit like Coca-Cola. I mean, Coca-Cola has not changed its brand from day dot, but it has changed its product mix, and people have gone along for the journey because it's great product, it's great quality, and people, they buy it. And that's, I guess, what our fans are telling us about the shorter versions of the game as well. They're just looking perplexed. It's like, no more. I can't handle it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot.